Thank you, Madam President, for a very inspirational talk. We are having elections in Copenhagen, in Denmark, on June 5th. I would wish that you could actually come join and be part of that. We could use some new inspiration, and I think your thinking is very profound, very interesting. I'm very happy as well to be joined by Fleur Pellerin, who's the former minister of the French government and now the CEO and founder of Korelya Ventures in Paris, plus Noah Raford, who's the CEO and chief futurist, nice title, of the Dubai Futurist Foundation. I myself, I'm Eric Lachey, and I'm the managing partner of byFounders, which is an early stage venture fund created by some of the most prominent founders in the Nordics and Baltics. We are very happy to have the founders of Skype, founders of Unity, Tradeshift, Vivino, Kahoot, and many others, and also, not to forget, Stintan Kivi here from Estonia. What nobody actually probably know here in the audience is that 15 years ago, I was early part of Skype, head of mobile. I came to Estonia for the first time, went to the outskirts of Tallinn in a small old factory building where there was a great group of very, very smart engineers, Toivo and Jan and Tavid, who now runs TransferWise and so on. And it was such an inspiration to see, you know, this little flower blooming of hope in a country that really was undergoing a tremendous change. And coming back now here, 15 years later, wow, you know, Estonia really serves as inspiration for the rest of the EU and definitely for the rest of the US. I'm based in San Francisco, and somebody over there could need a kick of good inspiration from Estonia. Just to set things in perspective before we kickstart a little bit of a short conversation. What's really interesting, as I'm based in Silicon Valley, everybody's raving about Silicon Valley. But we are actually doing pretty well in Europe. And if we're looking at how we're doing, if we look at from 2000 to 2013, there was 11 tech billion-dollar unicorns in Europe altogether, 11. And one of them was from the Nordic and Baltic, Skype, that really sparked a complete new era for the Nordic and Baltics. But what's more interesting is that from 13 to 18, so the last 5 years, we've actually created 41 tech billion-dollar unicorns in Europe. So a 4x increase in 5 years. But if we actually take a deeper dive in that, what's interesting is that Estonia is counting for 3 of them with a population of 1.3 million people. We have Denmark, where I'm from, we have 5 of these 41, so more than 10% coming from Denmark. And
I got 4 for Estonia, I'm sorry.
What, sorry?
Not 3, but 4 for Estonia.
4, yes. Okay, good, excellent. I'm happy and then we have France, that for a population of 60 million, have 4 tech unicorns. And I think it just shows a little bit that no matter size, you know, if you have the talent and the ambition, then you can really create a lot of change and innovation. And with that being said, I think we should open up. And Madam President, in Estonia, since I think there was an initiative in 2014 around an entrepreneurial strategy that was set in motion, what is the state of the union here in Estonia? You already mentioned some of the things, but what do you see right now is going on?
I mean, how should I know? I'm only a president in this country, and in Estonia we leave business development to business. I mean, Tallinn Kalamaja is the place to ask this question, but if I trust Allan Martinson and other investors and those who seek talent and provide money in the Estonian startup sector, then it may amount to about 300 million per year, which is the money which you can raise here in Tallinn for the startup sector. Yeah. And if you now compare this to the 100 million which the Estonian Development Fund, which was established especially for these needs in all its existence, has invested, then you can see that actually it doesn't matter so much what you provide in funding, but what you do as environment sector. And as you know, Estonia has the startup visas. Estonia also tries to facilitate in every way that if a company needs some changes in our legal sandbox so that they could continue to prosper and develop, then it is quite easy to talk to the government, parliament, and the Estonian parliament can be quite creative in making sure that all the new ideas are accommodated. For example, we regulated for Uber so that, they could work here, and we now have TransferWise in the similar sector, which is a unicorn.
Yeah.
So not TransferWise in that Taxify, in that now called Bolt in that sector, which is a unicorn. So here we actually try to do what our entrepreneurs tell us to do to make sure that their investment is safe and our people are safe while they, practice and prepare their services for wider audiences. And we have a certain level of experience in it, and this is where Estonia excels.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I don't know what they are thinking out there. It's none of my job.
No, but
I'm sorry to say.
It's few in politics that would dare to use the word creative. And I think it sets the scene very much. In Denmark, when Uber came to Denmark, they were kicked out within 6 months, right? Because all the taxi drivers was blockading that. But Fleur, France, I'm half French, and my heart beats for France. But I must say, it's been a little bit of you can say, a very stale period of like the potential from France. But you've really been one of the key drivers around the tech. Like the French tech movement, and I see, spring is coming to France. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so actually we come from quite a far, because I think from a perception point of view, but also self-perception point of view, France was not really proud of its tech ecosystem. And I was really frustrated when I was traveling abroad to have, in official trips, to have a lot of people telling me about the Château de la Loire, about Versailles, about Chanel bags and foie gras, but never about, some tech companies. And so I said, I said to the ecosystem, we need to do something for you to be more visible abroad, because we have great engineers, we have a great mix between creative industries and engineering in France. We have a lot of talent. So how come, everybody speaks still about TGV or Ariane, but not about the current, and Minitel, but not about the current innovation. So we started to work on the perception, international perception, and went, hundreds of startups, French startups, went to Las Vegas. So it was a bit communication. But it was useful, to change the perception. And then I tried, I'm a socialist, but I'm also a liberal. So I really felt that the best way for me to help the ecosystem was to create the best environment. So I totally agree with what Madam President just said. The best environment for creators and founders and investors to do their job, which is not the state's job. But the state's job is to work on market failures. And to support and root for the ecosystem. So that's what I try to do from a tax point of view, from investment point of view, because we had a problem in financing in France, but I think it's the case in Europe. As soon as, companies try to raise a Series B and C, so try to grow their business and project it abroad, we have a problem of financing, and we lacked capital at that time. So we really try to consolidate the venture capital industry on these growth stages, and worked on many different aspects to make the life of entrepreneurs easier and better. So that's, I thought was my mission, and I think we did that, and I think it produced good results. But now I think what we need to do at the European level, because I think of myself as not as a French, I'm an investor in Bolt, and I'm a proud investor in Bolt, and I'm very happy to see these kind of European stories where you have Estonian talent, you have German capital, you have French capital, and I brought some Asian capital inside, and I think we can grow success stories, European success stories that we can be proud of, no matter if they come from France or Sweden or Denmark or Estonia, but together I think we can be very strong.
And I would love to come back to that point. I think it's a very important one. Noah, so I went to Dubai some 20 years ago, which, it was almost just a landfill, or, and seeing what it is now. But, when you look at, for example, Norway, we always say that innovation have really never really been driven from Norway because they have so much oil. So there's like not been any need for doing anything of creating innovation outside the oil industry. Why Dubai suddenly is looking into innovation, and what what are the initiatives you are driving?
Sure, it's a wonderful question. And I think it's a common misconception of Dubai that it is an oil-driven economy. Of course, the UAE itself is about 30% of its GDP comes from oil. But Dubai in particular only has about 2% of its GDP coming from oil. So it's always been a trading hub, and particularly an integrator of different markets, cultures, religions, and societies in the region. And so from the very beginning, the country, the UAE, is only 47 years old. So very much like Estonia, it's had to really make itself in real time, or faster than real time. But there is this sense that given the place that it occupies geographically in the world, politically, economically, half of the world's population is within an 8-hour flight of Dubai. And those are the parts of the world that are growing the fastest, where the future is really being made. And I was very pleased to hear the leapfrogging example from Africa. Are there any Southeast Asians or Asians in the room? Okay, one. Great. Well, at least there's one representative, because the reality is, 85% of the world's population lives outside of Europe and North America. And according to some estimates, this is where 92% of the growth is forecast to be. So the future is happening in the South and the East. And as the president mentioned, it's happening in basic services. It's happening in the kinds of needs that most people in these environments face. I mean, 2/3 of people in India still lack access to a toilet or fresh water. So whilst we in the West, and I'm American, are used to think of innovation as a B2C play, or providing marginal improvements on efficiency, and therefore think about entrepreneurship in that sense as a consumer play that makes people's lives easier, faster, better, that same approach is being applied in the parts of the world where I'm from to fundamental human needs. And the funny thing about this part of the world is that these fundamental human needs are the first places where we're experiencing the effects of climate change, of technological unemployment, of the lack of matching between educational standards and cultural norms with the needs of the society. So Dubai has become this extraordinarily interesting place to test 21st century solutions to these 21st century challenges, most of which are in the heavily regulated sectors. I very much agree with Madam President and with Fleur that the role of government is to fix market failures, but I think it depends on what kind of innovation you're looking at, because the reality is, for us to develop solutions that will get us through the 21st century, will help us reimagine the relationship between citizens and governments, between workers and capital. There are no answers for this, and there's no market for it yet. So it becomes a market-making function for these long-term transformation things, and that's what we've been able to do in Dubai, because our survival depends on it.
Yeah. So on this topic of market failure or market reset, or you can say, what is that role of the state?
Well, first of all, you never know whether you really and truly have a market failure or you don't have. Actually, I think that in digital you mostly don't have a market failure, and you do have an issue rather that you have a regulative environment which is trying to buy more time for the old industries to continue to develop. And it sounds like you are paying for the farmers not to buy tractors in order to keep the manual work, on the fields, so that, people will not be driven out of the fields and into the towns today. Yeah. Very, very similar. At that time, we didn't do it, and that was fair that we didn't do it, because that allowed, industrialization to happen. But of course, industrialization was very painful for societies, because it was the poor people and lower middle class who had to bear the brunt of the cost of this transformation, and they didn't share really in the gains. The people working in industry only got richer in 60s, 70s, when the productivity got considerably high, and then you could really feed this dream family of 2 children and a wife not working, in the Central Europe, relatively easily. But it took more than half a century to get to this point. Right now, we have societies which will not accept this kind of pain. So we have to make sure that we spread the pain equally, which means that states do carry a certain responsibility, not only to set the right regulative environment for the tech development, but also for making sure that there is easy and secure access to good education. And I repeat, good education, not any kind of school, so that you wouldn't have intergenerational poverty, that each generation going to school knows that never mind how my parents managed, whether objective reasons they failed or whether they just failure, I will have the possibility to become a tech entrepreneur, an engineer, a heart surgeon, etc. So make sure you have egalitarian education systems. make sure you have healthcare systems which are available to all people, so that people know they are in basics well protected. And then make absolutely sure that people, when they are facing these difficulties of transforming from the old industries to the new industries, are adequately retrained, offer training before they lose their jobs. We are doing quite a lot of pipeline training here in Estonia to help people to climb towards these higher added value services. How to do it when meanwhile you are facing an economy where people are going independent, working over internet and globally? This is very much the question we quickly need to solve and discuss, and I feel OECD is the only place where we can start finding solutions, because we are still discussing how to tax Facebooks, etc., because they offer their services globally. Dear politicians, this is not the problem. Problem is that every year millions of people go independent, start working for 10 companies in 5 different countries. 2 are in Europe, 3 are in Asia. No, maybe somebody's on Antarctic, I don't know. Anyway, people work everywhere. They don't have a working address according to which we get taxes and the home address according to which we deliver services. Because while they work globally, they also live globally. Yeah. Which means we absolutely need to forget that there is a river of taxes coming in from enterprises. We need to start flying from flower to flower to gather taxes from individual people and become a safe dock for our people to invest, to work around globally, to grow their kids wherever they want, offer them school services online in their own language. This is our task. Okay. And this is difficult. I know it's much easier it is to cobble together a fund and say I'm doing state support for startup. But that is not the problem. The problem is elsewhere. Mais, Madame la Présidente, il faut dire que c'est moi, je pense, d'Hexagone d'aujourd'hui. Je pense d'Hackathon à Élysée, aussi de Paris 42 et aussi identité numérique en France. Donc, un grand merci. Ça développe bien en France maintenant.
I was fortunate I understood that. So talking about this market failure, again, France, what, great education, as we just heard, and still, what happened in France, and why is it now that it's coming back, and what is the role of the state in that?
Well, so on the education and training, I think there are many different issues. I was very concerned, for example, as a citizen, that recently in the last elections, European elections, last general or presidential elections, the fact that there are some studies showing that automation and artificial intelligence will probably make at least 20% of the jobs of tomorrow. I'm not speaking only on the qualitative, not quality jobs, superior sort of jobs, but all jobs will be made redundant. And so nobody thinks about how we're going to train the people who will be made redundant, and how will we guarantee that they have a job or a position in the society where we live. So this, I think, is not a question for in 10 years, but it's a question for tomorrow. And I was very surprised that this social question, which is a consequence of the digital transformation, was really not addressed by politicians. So that, I think, is one of the market failure, or at least something that the government should be taking care of. And then the adaptation of the school system. We have a very heavy and a lot of legacy in our school system, which used to be excellent. we train amazing engineers, amazing researchers, but amazing guys who do the 3D animation, etc. And the problem that we have today is, of course, we need to adjust this training to the new challenges of the jobs of tomorrow, data scientists, computer vision people, etc. So adjust the training schemes. But also the problem is today that we see big corporates who come to French companies, for example, and who say, okay, I'm going to hire you. How much do you earn today? I write you a check of 7 times to 10 times what you earn in that French company. Because I have a lot of money, and because also maybe I don't really pay the taxes I should pay, and I have a lot of cash. And so the problem is today is the war for talent, and it's a question for many companies could be a question for all the European companies to retain their talent today, because we train amazing engineers and amazing people and entrepreneurs, but we need to be able to retain them. And that will be a big issue.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's a political answer to that, but definitely it will be a very, very big challenge for corporations and also for politicians, I think, tomorrow.
So on this topic around talent, right? International talent, you know, and Noah, for you, Dubai, like how do you attract startups to come to Dubai and the free movement? I know there's the entrepreneurial or startup visa in Estonia. You have done something similar in France. Denmark is still like fumbling around and not knowing what to do. But like in Dubai, what's your approach?
Well, it's actually incredibly easy. One of the things that we found is many of the people in this room, many passionate entrepreneurs who are working in sectors that matter to these issues, education, healthcare, infrastructure, security, actually find very few places in the world where they find a regulatory regime which encourages the kind of experimentation which Madam President spoke about, matched with a kind of political ambition to really do big things. So we have a variety of programs, for example, something called the Dubai Future Accelerators, which connects startups from around the world. It's almost 90% international startups, big and small, with our main regulators who, in the case of Dubai, are also in some cases the main customers for these transformational services. And it's less an issue of addressing market failures. It's about creating a kind of market that does not yet exist and facilitating the cultural understanding between the old and the new there. And I'll just do two shout outs for Estonia here. On our very first cohort of the Accelerator program, we had an Estonian company that was looking at how to disrupt the funding process for research itself, take it from 9 months down to 30 days, called Guana. I think Marco might be in the room here somewhere. And when they came to us, we realized that in the UAE, the R&D process is massively underfunded and massively inefficient. So we worked with them to redesign our entire research funding strategy and launched this very successful pilot project, which has led to them getting more work within the European Commission, major funding abroad. So it's this exchange. And I think that the idea of offering people who care about what they're doing, who know what they're doing, who want to change the world, a support to do that turns out to be quite easy. The rest is details. We can figure out visas and residence and logistics and stuff.
Yeah, there's a saying that I actually taught from Johan Brandt, who's the founder of Kahoot, and he says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. Yeah. And I think it comes back to what you said, Madam President, around like the future is digital nomads, and you know people want to be wherever they want. But you know, can you elaborate more, talk more? You had some comments there, or?
Yes, because you asked about market failures at the first place, and while I believe that our European Union is in a perfect place to, have a competitive advantage in this new world of mobility, because after all, we have already the free movement of people,
yes,
and we have some thinking in how to follow our people going to other countries with the services. I mean, we follow them with full package of services, including e-voting, but every country follows them to a certain extent with pension services and healthcare services, wherever they go in Europe. And so we have a way of thinking that this is a normal way of doing. We also have good intercommunications and a place in Brussels where to argue and agree and settle on how we could best work together. No, it's not an unimportant place, and it's not an ineffective place.
No.
Because if you compare COP 21, 2, 3, 4, and these implementation mechanisms and decision-making mechanisms to Brussels is a very efficient way of managing our things. And this is what we keep doing. So we have a competitive advantage, but we have an important also market failure. And this in Europe tends to be the labor market failure. In Estonia, you have a country where you don't stay long in private sector or in public sector, because staying in one place and in one job brings you absolutely no benefits. I mean, you don't rise in your salary. Quite vice versa. If an Estonian is stuck in the same place for 5 years and doesn't see that he or she is already a director or a partner, they tend to leave, because obviously I was going nowhere. Whereas the career models in quite a lot of Europe expect you to live your life and only then conclude, okay, I never made it to the directorial level or somewhere in the public service, hence my life's a failure. And I think we need to liberate the job markets first. It's scary. Exactly at this time when we are dealing with this new technology influx and this new change which is akin to the industrialization period, it's very scary. but it's a necessity and it is a must, because otherwise you can never digitalize public sectors, because, I mean, you will have to run the digital sector and then still keep up all the people who have been given the lifelong their work guarantees. They are smart people, simply put into the golden cage, because they could find work, even in the startup sector, etc. We lost 60% of jobs in our tax board when we went online. But these people, I mean, they didn't stay unemployed, of course. It was very easy. I mean, lots of companies got really good tax specialists and financial managers out of this.
Yeah.
So we have to liberate European job markets. And I know how painful it may sound for French, yes.
And in France, on this startup visa or e-visa, like, has it worked out? Is it working out?
Yeah, it's quite working, because now I think, you know, all the job that we've done for the past 5 to 7 years has been, you know, really productive. And I think in terms of attractivity of the place, it worked quite well. So now we have this huge Station F, a big incubator. We've made a lot of improvement in the environment for business creation, etc. So a lot of foreign talents has also arrived in France. And I think that's, you know, the future of Europe is, of course, to have a more unified market. We are not a single market, actually. There's still many differences. You know, when a company here is created in Estonia or in France and wants to address the German market or the Danish market or the UK market, they have to adjust to a different regulation, to a different way to consume, to a different, you know, different cultures. So it's a cost, and it's painful. It's not the same as, you know, you're in Nevada and you're going to Oklahoma or I don't know. So it's not the same effort for the founders. So I think we need to also work on that. And I'm a really true believer. You know, populists are rising everywhere in Europe right now, but I still really believe, from you know, as an economic actor, I really believe in what Europe can bring to all, you know, European countries. And you know, the fact that we can bring together, create synergies and bring together talent from all over Europe is, I think, a great opportunity and a great chance for the future. So I'm really, you know, really betting on this, you know, startup European ecosystem and investor ecosystem. And I see now bigger funds and countries with sovereign funds also, you know, committing to creating big European businesses. And I think that's really our future.
Has the size of the French market been a sleeping pill for the tech industry, tech community in France?
So
given that, you know, hey, in Estonia, like, if you want to be big, you basically have to think global from day one.
Yeah.
And the same with, like, the other Nordic countries, like an Israeli model, while France is like, hey, if I make a blah blah car in France, it's pretty big, and I don't need to think about, like, transferring that to Germany.
It definitely is a mid-size, you know, the mid-size trap, because when you're in Israel or when you're in Estonia, you have to address a bigger market than the domestic market if you want to. I mean, you can not do it if you don't want to, but it's true that if you have a global ambition, you have to do it. So in France, it can be comfortable sometimes to just address the domestic market, and you can do good business, you know, in doing so. So it can be a trap sometimes to limit the ambitions of the entrepreneurs. But this has changed now, because I think the new generations also have bigger ambitions and they want to see far and global. So I think this mindset is really changing. But it's true that sometimes it can be comfortable, you know, not to be too over ambitious, and to just you know, address the domestic market.
We are going to wrap up. So we
wanted to say that I still want to stress that I think that an interoperable network of SMEs may be more valuable than a few global big companies.
Yes.
For a developing market and for every market, because SMEs are considerably more resilient when it comes to failure. Because, I mean, of course, some die, but always there will be new ones. Dying of a big company can be a massive structural problem. And
to that point, like, we saw what happened in Finland. Peter, who's sitting here with come out from Rovio, we saw the massive failure of Nokia, right? The explosion of Nokia. And, like, when you have a country that's so dependent on one company, and suddenly the good thing was that the entrepreneurs stood up and basically carried the country to a very different level, where Finland is really striving now in a gaming industry that is second to none. So I agree with, like, the resilience of having a broader base, right?
The problem being, if you have too many companies dependent on a very big actor that is non-European. I mean, if you look at today, the number of companies who are very dependent on Google, for example, on you know, on their revenues, it's also a problem, and it's a bigger problem than you know, this player was a European one, I think.
But if I may, as you brought up Finland, and you can all testify he did, not me. But Finland in 90s, when there was the investment banking boom, which came from America to Europe, I mean, lots of angel finance and seed finance in private sector. Finland offered massive Tekes and Sitra support. And I checked the numbers, I mean, compared to, for example, Sweden per capita, the inflow of FDI to Finland was much lower, visibly lower. And this means because the public money was just sloshing in the system, it crowded out the private money. But of course, public money has to write 30-year action plans, I mean, and 30-year nowadays seems ridiculous, but it didn't in 90s. And then, of course, you choose certain sectors where you invest, and this way you make your economy less resilient and poorer because you are only investing in certain sectors. Whereas, I mean, if you leave it, if you work hands-off, create conditions, but do not limit the development, you get a much more resilient and varied economy. So the example of Nokia is too narrow alone. It's a whole environmental issue, which there was actually in Finland. And I know Finland also certainly has learned from it, because it's a great startup nation with a great startup conference akin to this one as well. So we all know that we can learn from our mistakes, and definitely we Estonians are making our mistakes daily as well here. So I don't want to be too critical of our good Nordic neighbor, but this is simply economic analysis.
Okay, we need to wrap up now. I really appreciate Fleur, Noah, and Madam President to join me here on stage. As a final remark, I think what's really encouraging is that over and above, compared to 15 years ago, we now actually have great role models in entrepreneurs here that will inspire the next generation of founders to come out with even greater, bigger ideas and changing the world as we see today. Thank you so much for being with me here on stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.